Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. It is noon. My name is Dan Quigley. I am Senior Vice President at Kirkpatrick Management Company. What that means is that I am in charge of the associations, all the associations, the CAMs, the accounting, the customer service reps, the new business development, customer care, things like that. So I also manage some properties. If any of the people that I manage their properties are on here, my apologies. And so I do my best, but I'm a better people manager than property manager these days, but I can still put it together for a couple minutes at a week here, maybe. Anyway, I just want to welcome everybody to the program. This is our fifth year that we're doing this KMC ABC webinars. We've done budgets and reserves, I think 3 or 4 times, and this is Debbie's going to get on here and give her rendition of what budgets and reserves should look like and how we do things. Talk a little bit about Kirkpatrick Management Company. Some of you are new on here that I haven't seen your names before, but it's a family business. That the boards turn around, and sometimes you don't know who you hire. But we're a small family business here, located on the north side of Indianapolis. We have another office in Greenwood. There's still 5 Kirkpatricks working for the company. We manage primarily associations in the central Indiana area. There is a division that is multifamily housing that manages in the 5 states surrounding us, but the people you'll talk to today, the people you'll see today, primarily are in associations. Budgets and the reserves are a big deal for us. This is what we do. This is what we do well. Annual meetings are huge. It's where it's our time to shine. We should get annual meetings right every time. There's no room for error on that. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. One thing I do have to tell you about the Corporate Transparency Act. It looks like that's going to come through in one form, shape, or something like that. I have got a word out to a couple different attorneys in town, and we do have some pricing available for that. Looks like we will be able to pass that along to the board of directors. It's going to basically something Kirkpatrick will not we will manage, but we'll manage it through an attorney. Right now, we're waiting for one more attorney to get back to us. One attorney has said no, they're not going to do it. So it's interesting, but the Corporate Transparency Act is not a favorite of anyone, but it is something it looks like maybe we're going to do this year, and hopefully after this year it will be taken care of. One last thing, once I did explain to you guys that I do work for you. You guys pay for my cell phone, so I'm going to give you my cell phone number. My cell phone number is 317-847-0016. The reason is, listen, if you can't find what you're looking for, you've tried your manager, you've tried your regional manager, tried accounting, it's just not working, give me a call. I'm better at text. You text me first and I'll call you back. But it happens a couple times a month. Somebody will call me and say, you know what, I can't find my CAM. I can't find somebody. Can you help me out? Something quick, something easy. I should be able to handle those kind of questions. I am going to turn it over for a couple minutes to my new wife, Kelly, and she's going to talk a little bit about what we've got coming up as far as roundtables. Kelly?
Well, thank you, Dan, for that lovely introduction. Welcome, everyone. We are very happy that you are joining us today. Just a quick update. Back by popular demand, we will be adding a 4th roundtable. The date that's been chosen will be October 10th from 6 to 7:30. We will be conducting this via Zoom because we are going to go ahead and open it up to all board members. This one is going to be a little unique in that it's not going to be a streamlined topic, which is what we've done in the past. This is going to be more of a question and answer. So we will have a panel of experts present to answer all of your questions. We will have an attorney present, an insurance agent present, a landscaping representative, pool, ponds, things of that nature. So really any questions that you can think of, we'd love to have you join us. This is also going to be a time for most of you, or at least some of you, that it will be prior to your annual meeting. So keep in mind, bring those questions with you that you think may be brought up at your annual meetings, or ones that you'd like to address with the membership at your annual meeting. We'd also like to remind you that we will want to keep those a little more broad because obviously some of the questions will be based solely on your community's governing documents. But again, any questions that you can think of in really an array of areas, we are going to just be here to have those questions answered for you. So we look forward to seeing you again October 10th from 6 to 7:30 via Zoom. Invites will be coming out in the next couple of weeks, and we have verified there's not a Colts game that evening. So we hope to see you all there.
Thank you, Kelly. One last thing, I'm going to turn it over to Debbie. Do you see the button down there at the bottom? It says Q&A. If you have a question and you would like to ask a question, you can see on there. Please write it in there during the. If you don't forget it, write it in there when it comes up. If it's something I can answer, I'll answer it on the Q&A. If not, we'll bring it up to Debbie as we come along. But that's really the best way to get questions to us because everybody's muted. And so there's really no way for you to ask a question. So this presentation is done by Debbie Kroeger. Debbie has been with us for a number of years. She has more alphabets after her name than anything that show up on Google. She's got her MBA from Iowa. She is now going to be sitting for her PCAM here in the next year. Loves what she does. She's mentors and trains all of our new people. And so you'll see her name on a lot of different things, but she is passionate about budgets. And so we're going to let her kind of talk to you about this and we'll go ahead and get started. Debbie, it's all yours.
Thank you. Thank you much. So my name's Debbie Kroeger, and I want to let you know I'm a little more informal when I talk on the phone, on the presentation. So ignore it if you're more like somebody wants it very scripted. Also, I want to say, also in October, it should be Kate and Clark from the University of Iowa being on the Fever and the Women's Championship. Sorry, just had to say. Hey,
there's that Iowa stuff coming through. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, one of the biggest myths out there is that you have to be an accountant to do a budget. It's simply not how it is. You just need to know your community, and Excel spreadsheet will kind of do the rest. It's really about the planning you're going to go through. I've had people say, no, I have a CPA, therefore I know how to do all this stuff. And of course you do. It's just the process might be different because a budget for business is much different than a budget for a nonprofit. And we call it a quasi nonprofit because income tax is limited, but you still pay taxes on interest or if you sell part of your property common area. The third one is if you save money and you skip maintenance items, it's good for your financial position, meaning you'll have a lot extra left at the end of the season that you can put to reserves. However, if you go to your HOA documents, your fiduciary duty says you have to maintain and not just save. It's a good balance that you have to go through. So we're going to do this in 3 sections. We're going to talk about the planning section, the types of budgets, and then how do you make it work in the actual assessments for the owners. So planning is all about your HOA documents and the limits. KMC obviously knows them pretty well, but as a board, you have a duty to know them as well. The other biggest things is you need to know who gets to approve the budget. Is it the owners? Is it the board? Or is it a combination of the owners and then the board? Those are the key things to know. You also need to know what are the limits of your increases. Can you only go to 4% or 3%? What happens if the owners are in charge of approval and you don't get approval? That's something else you need to know. With the reserve, do you have a specific requirement that you have to have in your budget? And how much notice do you need to provide? So here's some common rules that we've seen. Prior to 2009, there was no specific limit on if the board can approve versus an owner. If you have a specific document that says the owners have to do it, you should always check with your attorney to make sure how that applies to the Nonprofit Act and the HOA Act, because there's two different things. If it's limits of the owner to buy, what do you do when it's not approved? Hopefully in your HOA documents, it says, well, if the owner's unapproved, then the budget can go up by 4% by the board's majority vote. That's typically what you'll see. If you don't have anything like that, then it probably means the current budget has to flow over to the next one. Sometimes they do a special meeting to try to get through. Reserve funding. Reserve funding is going to be a combination of how much you have now and how much you need to have in the future. Some HOA documents say a minimum of the HOA budget has to go to reserve. So that's a number you have to kind of start with and then work into the next steps, which we'll talk about shortly. The notice for the fee changes, which are usually January 1st, unless you're a different fiscal year, is 30 days. There are some that are 60 days. So make sure you see that in your HOA, in your documents. That's a very important thing. And one of the things when you talk about assessments, what people don't realize it says annual assessment. That doesn't mean you pay it annually. Sometimes the practice you can do it monthly or quarterly or semi-annually. The key is you have to make sure your budget reflects that flux of money in and out. As well, coupons are only a courtesy. The HOA documents in any community say assessments only. It doesn't say how you know it. You are obligated to pay them whether you get a piece of paper or not, because owners have to take ownership of their duty. And when it comes to the budget, KMC will perfect a draft based on the traits and that we've seen. They will then give it to the board to maybe change, tweak it a little bit, and then the board should sign off on or put in the record by a vote that is it approved, just to make sure there's no confusion going forward. And then that information is sent to our accounting department.
So Debbie, that's the common way we like to do things, but there are some people who like to do their own budgets. They've done it for years, and we're fine on that. We just want to make sure that it goes through ours to make sure that, we want to make sure we see it before it's sent out, and we want to check the numbers. Not that your numbers are wrong, but we just want to make sure that we didn't miss anything. You didn't miss anything, and that's what you're doing for us. So we would do the same for you.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you, Debbie.
Yeah. So now we're in the planning. Now we have to gather the data, and we start thinking about, well, what do we really need and what do we really want? Because it's a big difference. You need to keep every month, look at your financial report. It's really important. Specifically, not that you shouldn't read them all, but the balance sheet, which is page 2, and then pages 3 through 5 talks about your budget comparison, both for operating and for reserves. You need to know it. You'll see changes that you need to make. You might want to change a thing. The key thing with any changes, you can change buckets or geocodes as we talk about, but you cannot change the fee unless you look your HOA documents and see if it's even an option. And if you do, what are the situations where that can happen? So check your contract dates. If you have ones that are expiring, make sure you get ready to do your RFPs. Some people already, like with pools, they're getting their RFPs received because it's end of the pool season. With landscaping, you will often find them not providing those bids until late after the season is out, because it's just so many variables when it comes to staffing and cost. Forecasting through the year end. That's important because that forecasting number is going to be part of the trends you'll use to decide, okay, what should my number be for next year, 2025? When you talk about the needs, we're talking about maintenance and investment. When you talk about what wants, that is about what the owners talk about the most. I know Judy, that's one of our board members on the team, will tell you that community talks about landscaping above all other things. So part of that is to help focus on that, since that's one of the things that owners really want. And since they're paying for it as your neighbors, that's something definitely consider. And then there's changes on governmental items. If you're not in Fishers, this won't make any sense, but in Fishers, they are now taking over trash and sewer. So that is definitely going to impact your budget for 2025, either bringing it out in most cases, unless your buildings are such that you can't pull the sewer out. But for sure, they're saying unofficially it starts January 1st, but they suggest use that date for your budget. Okay, operating versus reserves. This is one of the biggest areas when we look at, I get all requests for using reserves monies. And what I'm seeing a lot of is a reserve item for $400. That's likely not a reserve item. A operating item is the 3 R's: repair, replace, and refresh. What's the difference between refresh and renew? Is if it's new and it's with a substantial amount of number. Common ground, pretty basic. It's your grounds, your landscaping. You may be adding landscaping, but they're small items. Irrigation may be included in your landscape contract. Sometimes it's not. Maybe it's you have to put in there for repairs that have to be done. Your amenities, all these things are part of the things you need to think about in operating. For HOAs, mostly you're going to get common area. You can also on HOAs have amenities. It just depends on the community. With buildings, that's almost always a condo or a PUD. Now here's the reserve part. The reserve part is intended to extend the useful life. So if you currently have a roof that is 25 years old, the extent that its useful life is ending. So therefore, you have to start spending for that. Now, hopefully you have done something already, because roofs are very expensive right now. And then usually, if you want to say to yourself, okay, well, what is one of those items that would be covered? You might contact your insurance rep, because often when there's a claim, it'll tell you the things that they'll cover. For they might do a clubhouse, or they might do a light fixture, but they're not going to do your shrubs and sod. Typically, those are not things that they would cover, because they don't have a value specifically other than the look, and that's nothing you can manage. You can also, if you've recently had a loan, an appraisal can sometimes give you that information. And it's never these small little things. It's always something big. So as a general rule, using 5,000 is a kicker. You can say, okay, that's probably going to be a reserve item. Not always, but something that's 1,000 or 4,000 or 400 or something like that, that is most likely a maintenance item, which it means they're not replacing it. Replaces. You're not getting a brand new one. You're just fixing the kind you have. A light fixture is a perfect example. We have regular light bulbs now, and we want to go to LED. That's not a reserve item. It's small amount, so therefore it would not be something that you would include. So with operating budgets has 3 types. You have a contract. Let's have specific amounts and end dates. You'll have recurring that you always have to do, but you don't necessarily know the amount. And then you have variable, which some people call it discretionary, but discretionary has the suggestion that you don't have to do it. If it's part of your fiduciary duty, you still have to do it. So that's why you use variable, because it's really going to depend on what your 3-year trend is as being done. When I say about net zero budget, what I mean, if it's too far under, it means you may have skipped doing some maintenance. Often you'll find owners say, well, you have too much left there. That means you didn't budget right, and we want our money back on that part. Can't do it. It's in the budget, but sometimes, oh, I have saved 30,000. You might want to ask yourself, did you budget it right? And then if it's well over the budget, that's often because when you did the projections, you weren't being realistic on what's going on in the community. Maybe more and more of the bricks need to be tuck pointed, which that happens with age. So really being realistic as possible, because what if you don't be realistic, you're going to end up borrowing from your reserve, which is something you really want to avoid.
So Debbie, we did have a question and asking about, hey, if they have money, is any money at the end of the year, if they do end up with a couple grand left over, or, you know, is that taxable? And that was a question that was asked, because you were talking about how interest from these savings accounts are taxable, but what about the, you know, net income on that?
Okay, so from a practical standpoint, what you'll see at the end of the year, you'll have X amount of dollars left in your operating, because theoretically it should be zero. On the other side, you never want your balance sheet to be zero. So what you have to do, say you have 30,000 sitting there, and you only need 10,000 to work for the first 3 quarters. You move that to the reserve, and that part is not taxable. Now, I'm not an accountant, so any of the accountants that for nonprofits want to weigh in on that, from a practical standpoint, that's what we do. Some people wait till January, February. That you just get, when you do that, you want to make sure you cover 3 months of your operating expenses, because you don't want to take it to zero, because then you're just going to borrow from them.
So Merle, to get more dial that in a little bit more, like if you end up with $1,500 at the end of your year, you're not you're just going to roll that in next year, is what we're saying. That's just going to roll into next year. It's different than what interest earns is not money that was already yours. So that money's yours, staying yours, and so you will not be taxed on that.
Yeah. The only other time I've seen a tax, and I think Dave Kroeger is on the call, where they sold some part of their common area to the utility company, and they did have to pay gains on that particular process, and then it showed up in the taxes as income tax, because it basically is sales tax. So that's very rare.
The only other one is Brenda will tell you this from Lion's Head. They do rent out you know, parking spaces, you know, garages, things like that, as long as they can show over the years that they are doing work on those, that they do not get taxed on that. So there's just some different things you got to make sure.
Yeah. Okay, so that was the other thing, is if you get 100% like to the dollar of the budget matching, something's not going right. When you set the budget is one thing, but where you end up is different. So sometimes like playing chess, you're just moving stuff around to make sure stuff. A common one is, okay, I didn't have any snow, so I'm going to reflect all these GLs and put that money to the snow, because I'm focused more on the coding than how you're actually spending money. And you don't want to do that. So you can read this part. One of the biggest problems right now is insurance, and this is mostly related to condos and PUDs. Insurance is just a animal of itself, and there's plenty of articles out there that we can send out to people. It's just one of those things that you almost cannot budget unless you over budget, and I'd rather be over budget than under budget. With HOAs, we're not seeing much at all in the changes, unless you have like a big clubhouse or something like that, then it will go up a little higher. The thing about going down to variable is using the contingency. Contingency can be a good or a bad thing, or you just want to use it to say, okay, I don't know what I'm going to need to do, so I'm going to put it in contingency. Well, in general, the best way to do it is just leave it go. So if it's a common area item, just put it there. Granted, you might be over the budget, for sure, that could happen. We have one situation where occasionally they have plumbing leaks underground. that might be something you want to use for a contingency. But again, you could really leave it as common ground or grounds itself. So don't overthink it, make it pretty simple. So I'm giving you an example of a operating budget. Now, for anybody that's done it, I mentioned geocodes. We just have 4-digit codes that help with the running of the reports annually and monthly. So sometimes you'll hear me say, oh, that's a 5,700, that's a common. So just in case you know that that's a weird, what that word means. So you can see those red, those are your common, or your contracts. Those are the first you put in first, right? You could also put income right out the gate, but you could wait till we get to the net part, which is number 5. And then you're going to put your recurring, and that your recurring is typically your utilities. So you don't have to go through your bills and say, well, it came up this 10% and 5%. Just take the average for the year and spread it through 12. You'll find that particularly happening where you see the blips is if you're using it for irrigation or pools. You're going to have that blip, but just use the average because you're never going to get it specific or perfect on a monthly basis. Now the variable stuff are the ones in the black. The variable, this is why you want to make sure you don't use chess with your figures. You want to let everything sit where it is. And I know this probably I've said this 10th time, but I really need you to remember that because it'll make your life so much easier. So then you want to talk about, okay, I see this is happening for the last 3 years. This item, like events, is going up and up and up. But I have to trim down my budget. That might be one of those things you skip. So I put all my inspections or expenses in. Then I go to the top, what says income, and I put in the amount that you have right now with no change. And then you get to see, okay, am I over or under? That's when you start tweaking. If you're positive, you might want to take the extra money to your reserves. If you're negative, then you got to start thinking, oh, well, maybe last year I did a lot of building maintenance, so it won't be as high this year. Or snow removal, for example, maybe you always put 20 in there, but we've found that over the couple of years, we only need about 15. So that's where most of your tweaking is done in the black items. So if you're negative, then you need to start. There's 2 ways you can do it. You can reduce how much you're going to fund the reserve, or you increase the fee. So with the budgets that we provide, we start with no change. Specifically, if say no, we don't want to change it, then we won't give you other columns. If you say we'd like to look at some options, typically you say, okay, do a 5% increase and let's see what that does. That's the tweaking there you're going to go process. And that is literally, you sit down one-on-one. Sometimes you do it yourself. Often the budgets are discussed by the board way ahead of time as far as conceptually, what do they want to do, where they want to be. And then you go to this step. Okay, now I'm only talking about, yeah, you want some?
No, I said it's fancy. I really like the way it fades out, fades in. It's very cool. Yeah.
I know some things. Yeah.
Yeah. Who knew?
So the reserve study, I'm not going to talk about that specifically. I'm going to talk more about reserves and talking again about it's a major asset. An example might be, okay, the fountain is broken. So I want to save the $700 and not fix it. But by doing that, you are putting your major asset in jeopardy of needing to be replaced sooner. So those are major assets and why you think about them. You also in a reserve study, you're going to look at your current conditions. What does it look like now? How old is my roof? What was the last time I replaced my pool cover? Those are all things that they're new, therefore they're part of it. The other thing that a reserve study does, it projects it out up to 30 years, but typically it's the first 5 to 10 that's can be the most relevant because it adjusts for replacement costs. It was really hard in the last couple of years because of COVID and all the crazy prices that were coming through. So it's been a little challenging to look at those reserve studies back then. And remember, a reserve study, just like a budget, is a guide. You don't go to your reserve study and say, okay, here's my reserve study. And I've got these 2 items on here. One says the clubhouse and one says the pool coverage. And then you look at it and say, well, we don't have the money right now to do the clubhouse, so we're not going to do it. You don't have to put these things in your budget. These are things that you should think about. And if you're not doing a reserve study, we can certainly give you the names of some people. Or if you want to, you can see like examples of what those documents look like. And the bottom line is what you save is done to spend. And that's the thing. You can spend, but if you never spend, then you're actually not protecting the asset. It depends, of course, on the asset and the money you have. But generally speaking, you don't just keep money. Yeah, there are things you have to continue to do. And if you're unfunded, which a reserve study can tell you, or if you need a general idea of what, if you're unfunded, if you're underfunded, you will have special assessments. Nobody likes to say the word, but it's the reality. If you don't have the funds, that's what's going to happen. Okay, so we talked about reserves. Here's some examples of reserve expenses. You put all new downspouts and gutters in. That's brand new. If you just replaced one because it had a crack, that would be an operating item because you're not improving the whole community. The same is in landscape improvements. You redo your front entrance. It could be the sign. It could be all the the plants that are perennials, those kind of things. If it's new or a major rehaul, that would be a reserve item. You have cracks in your sidewalks. That's a crack. You just seal it. That's operating. We've been all new driveways. That's a reserve project. A tennis court. You update you resurface it. You're not just painting it over. That would be a reserve item. Now, if it's only maybe $1,000, you might want to think putting it to operating. That's kind of those, sometimes there's the depends situations, not always. And one of the contingencies, I always put contingencies in my reserve budgets, is because you just don't know what's going to happen in the future. So if you put your thing under the the name of contingency, that you might not have to go to the community and get a vote to do some things that, you know what, we hadn't thought about it, but now we want to do it. A good one is the pool cards. You don't know that you want to do the pool cards until something happens. Like, you know what, now let's just get a new system. That would be a reason to use contingency. It doesn't mean you can't use it for other things, but it's like a whole place where you hold money. If you have a big project that was done by a hurricane, not a hurricane, that's somewhere else, a tornado, you're going to have deductibles. Often deductibles can be pretty high now, so you can use reserves to pay for those deductibles. Okay, now you do the planning. So I'm going to make the assumption that you need 30 days notice. So we're starting from the bottom. 30 days would be November 30th. So that means you have to have it in the mail and or email. Most of the time it has to be in the mail. So you have to allot for 2 weeks, especially that time of the year, to get it out in the mail. Now, if that's the case, then you might have your annual meeting before that. But that's specifically to the ones that have to have owner approval. If the board's doing the approval, you can wait till December or whenever time you think is good for you. Then you have to have the budget done to do those things before that, because you have to send the budget out typically with the annual meeting. And then, now we're in September, which means right now as a board, you need to start talking about all these questions, because it'll be October before you turn around, and then now it's push time for all the budgets. So start thinking about that timeline. Okay, so I end my formal presentation was knowing that knowledge is power. So that's the reason I have all those letters at the bottom of my name, is because not only I'm not a power person, but I do like to know things. I like to learn all the time. So that's, and hopefully you do too, or you wouldn't be sitting here. So I have a little game, but Dan, what questions are from?
I have just a couple questions and a couple things. I believe it's Max asked if there are particular requirements for moving operations surplus to reserves. So I would check your documents on that. I've seen, I know there's a place, Oak Hall, up in Fishers, and they have a specific form that they fill out, and they vote about it at the annual meeting, different things. They're following their declarations. So a lot of times you have to follow those declarations, but many times it is, we go back to the best business practices. If you think that you're doing what's right for the community by moving operations surplus to reserves, do it. I think there are some, there's not going to be any, I just talked to a neighborhood in Noblesville 2 days ago that moved $50,000 2 years ago, and it's been a huge difference in their in the reserve interest that they're getting. So I mean, it's a big deal. So I think I don't believe there are any state requirements on this. I tell you, before we send it back, we send out we're going to send out a recording of this and this as a PDF form of this presentation. I'll make sure on that, because I don't believe there are any requirements on this, state requirements. But since you called me out, Max, I'm on it, so I'll find out. But there shouldn't be any on that. I think that it goes back to best business practices. But I think the other thing is, Debbie talked about it. You just don't want to rob Peter to pay Paul. You don't want to move all that money over and then have to go get it again. And let's go back. We do have an association that does that. They like to play it really close. They'll put like 3 months in the operating, 3 months, money that we need in the operating, and pull it out 4 times a year. They'll go get it out of the reserve. It's kind of a pain, but I get it. That there's good money these days in interest on those reserves. So one other thing, Debbie, before I let you go Debbie has some good questions and answers. She's wanted to run by everybody, but she's talking about, we do talk about the budget. There is a thing, some of you, your associations, if your associations was established after 2009, so Debbie, you can call me on this, I think that's what it is, and you want to raise your dues more than 10%, let's say that, they're just completely lowered. You're going to have to, reserve study comes through and you are way underfunded. You need to really bump that stuff up by over 10%. If your HOA was founded before 2009, you don't have to mess with that. You have to go by your governing documents. But after 2009, you need to get 50% of your homeowners to approve a budget increase over 10%. So that's kind of where we're coming from on that too. So just a lot of these different things. Your CAM should be able to help you on that, but also you'll have Debbie's email address. You can always get back to her. You guys know how to find me on different things, but if you have questions on that, I am not afraid to say I don't know, but we'll look things up and find out, just because with the state requirements thing, you asked it twice, and so that kind of gave me a little bit of a shiver down my back. I'm like, okay, maybe I'm wrong. I've been wrong before. It's been a while. Kelly will tell you that. But we'll see. Let me make sure that I know what I'm talking about. I think we have answered all the questions that we've got here. So Debbie, you had a couple questions, general questions. You want to test the knowledge, see if anybody was listening. Is that what you were doing?
That's kind of it. Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I'm going to start with number 1. Now the options are, is it operating? Is it a reserve item? Or is it depend? So number 1, the pool umbrella broke in a storm. Is it operating or reserve? It is operating, because you're replacing.
Give me a second to write down my answer. Gotta pause a little bit, like 2 counts so that I can write my answer down. Go ahead.
You're cheating.
No, no, good. Go ahead.
Okay. The front sign was hit and you can't see it, who did it. So you need to add a new system for safety purposes. Is it a reserve item or an operating? In general, this would be a reserve item. Partly because you're probably going to have to pay part of it with insurance money, but also because the key thing again is new. So you have it, number 3, annual tree trimming contract. Is it operating or reserve? Trimming is maintaining. You're not putting in new trees, you're maintaining it. Even though some accounts could be 11,000 a year, then you have to budget for it. Even it may not be a contract, but it's part of your duty to maintain those trees. Trees are very expensive. So always keeping them healthy is good. Number 4, you want to put a new landscape package design at your front entrance. It's going to have perennials. It's going to have new mulch. It's going to have new lights. It's going to have a lot of things to make it look completely new. Is this a reserve or an operating? This is actually a kind of a depends. In some things, like with you look at the grants that Fishers provides, things that add value are the things that keep coming back. So annual flowers would not be something that's operating, that is reserve. So you might want to pull it out. It'll just depend on the situation, but generally speaking, because it's new, it's a new design. You could also say because you had professional services part of it, that would be a reserve item. Okay, you have insurance increased by 30%. You now have 25,000 you were not anticipating. Is it reserve or operating? And this certainly would be a reserve item. It's way over 5,000 and it will greatly impact your amount that you're collecting. And it's possible, depending how low your reserves are, that something that high might have to create at least a short-term special assessment. Sorry about that. So there's a bunch other questions that I'm sure I could give you, but this is the ones I think that are most often and I've seen. So,
okay, a couple more popped up
okay.
while you were gone. One of them I'll take, the other one I'll let you take. So there is one that says if you need umbrellas for your pool due to age, is that operating also?
Yes, because it's low, it's not a high volume. If you were doing all new furniture in a pool that includes some umbrellas, that would be bigger because it's a full project. But 1 or 2, that was operating.
Okay, then the other question, which believe it or not, we have gotten before, I've gotten before, can we decide to eliminate our HOA, which means you want to dissolve the HOA, not just fire Kirkpatrick. You want to fire your board, everybody, take it all and flush it down the toilet. I get that. Some days you probably want to do that as a board member, but I understand. But one of the things you'll need to do is I would talk to your there's a couple great HOA attorneys in town. Check your documents. Sometimes there's documents you have to dissolve the HOA. I have looked at a couple of them before where they were 100% in order to dissolve the HOA. Very difficult depending on the age of your association. Some of the newer stuff with newer builders and newer documents, they don't have the ability to do that. So it will probably have to be a state law or a not-for-profit law to dissolve that association and that incorporation. So that's something you need to talk to your attorney about. But there's plenty of good ones, and you can talk to your CAM about that, and he'll show you what we need to do. But I think that's it on that happy note. No, I'm kidding, Kelly. You can ask those questions anytime you want. I think we've answered all of our questions there, and I appreciate everybody coming out. We'll hope to see you all on the 10th of October. It's going to be kind of new for us because it's going to be, you know, a lot of questions and answers. We're going to send something out, obviously, but we would love to have some questions beforehand, just so we can tell the guys what we're looking for. But we should have people from, you know, all of our main categories in our budgets. You know, we're gonna have a reserve guy. We'll have, you know, we can even have a roofing guy. If you have a question for a concrete guy, I can get a concrete guy here to ask questions. So answer questions. Whatever you need, we're on it. This is just something new. I think it's a good way to finish the year so that you can have some ideas. Kelly, Debbie, do you have anything you want to add?
Nope, I'm good.
Nope, I think that's it. We look forward to seeing all of you there on October 10th via Zoom.
All right. Thank you all. Have a great day.
Thank
And, we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thanks, guys.